Welcome to another episode of the Who Dat Jedi podcast. We are the Who Dat Jedi in rainy, gonna be cold New Orleans. But as always, I'm Aaron, and with me is Dave and Fredo. How you doing, guys?
Good.
Trying to stay warm.
And as well, as bad as we have it, my sister in Texas, it was 19 today, and her front door froze. So, I guess I'll take the 45 that we're gonna have tomorrow, I suppose. But man, can it be cold during the work week and then nice on the weekend, please? Can we just have that? But we are getting the rain that we need. But you didn't come to this to listen to three old men talk about the weather.
Look at my day.
my sciatica.
That's my parents' favorite topic of conversation, other than their health. Yeah. So.
Or traffic.
Yeah.
Hey, it's something we all go through, So anyway, okay. Well, we're going to be watching again. This is going to be a watch party, I suppose, of the latest episode of the Book of Boba Fett. So episode 6, right? Or should we say the Book of No Boba Fett? But anyway, you can get on Disney Plus and skip the intro and skip the recap and get to where you see the weather vanes flying in the sands of Tatooine, and we'll start there here in a little bit. And boy, oh boy, this episode had some stuff in it.
Had a lot of stuff.
But like I said, it was Fredo and I were talking about this earlier. It was kind of like the Scooby-Doo episodes where they're not only with the Harlem Globetrotters, but also with Batman and Robin. It was like, holy cow. We'll talk. So we're just going to let the episode go, and we'll talk about it. But first, it is carnival season, and I actually went to a parade in the East. It was Nefertiti, right? Yeah. So our friend Mandy was in it, and it was on Sunday, and it was a nice day, and it was really fun. Good weather, and it was light crowds, so it was kind of good training wheels but it was just nice to see a float and people throwing crap off of it, and so Sophie says hi. But the one we really got to be geeked out over is this Saturday. If you're listening to this is February 3rd as we're recording it. So Saturday the 5th is the intergalactic crew of Chewbacca.
That old man's mad.
We have interviewed the heads of that crew. What are they called again? The Overlords?
Overlords? Yeah.
The Overlords. We've interviewed them on the podcast before, so you can go back in the archives and listen to that. One of our first episodes was in NOLA Brewing. And I was distracted by Donkey Kong machines. But anyway, yeah, crew of Chewbacca. So it's it's not just Star Wars; it's all sci-fi stuff and just general weirdness. But so Fredo, you got kind of the skinny on that, right?
Well, they did put up today. They announced for everybody through their social media that there's NOPD. This is their post. So, Chewbacca and aliens and fans alike, we have an important announcement. Unfortunately, NOPD will not be able to staff our full route as originally planned. Instead, we'll be lining up on Elysian Fields at Royal and proceeding down Decatur through the French Quarter. We'll be updating maps and potentially shifting start time. Please stay tuned as our team works quickly to make these changes. So, kind of the realities of the situation in 2022 in New Orleans. We already kind of knew that Croix de Vaux, which is another parade that takes a similar route through the Marigny, the French Quarter, was having its route changed because of NOPD staffing issues. So things like Chewbacca's, which is a much bigger parade in terms of just the number of subcrews and people that are marching on it.
So there's a couple things. There's a couple things about this. First of all, it's like, you can kind of understand it. NOPD is understaffed as it is, and we're having like a bunch of, carjackings and everything else and a bunch of other crime that's going on. And so it's like fix our crime, no, you've got to guard our parades. It's like, all right, which do you want? But join the police force, folks. But the other part of this is, though, I know that Crew de Vue and Chewbacca's, they usually go through more of the French Quarter, and I'm actually from a COVID perspective, I'm glad that they're going down Decatur and and South Peter, because that just is a little bit more spreading out space. There's times in Crew de Vue when you're down in the quarter that, I mean, you can't, once you get to a spot, that's it, and you're there. You're not going to be able to even come close to distancing, much less social distancing. So it's kind of nice that they're doing that. So I mean, that's just the way Carnival is going to be. It's going to be some changes for this year, but it'll get better. So
What I think is kind of messed up here is like it came down so late.
Mhm.
Like the leaders of the crew didn't get notified until today, and the parade's 2 days away. I just think that's like somebody dropped the ball there at the city level, because that's just really messed up. That, oh, by the way, you're going to change your route in 2 days, when they probably been promoting it this other way this whole time.
yeah, but it was just hot in the news. It was like a couple days ago when the mayor and you get the police chief has the full confidence of the mayor, which means that he probably doesn't. So I'm sure there was some meeting that probably happened earlier in the week, and he's like, well, if you want us to do A, B, or C, then we're going to have to do X, Y, or Z with these parades that are coming up. So
And part of the
yeah, you might there. It's a good chance that something got totally dropped, but it also could have been a shift in priorities. I don't know. I mean,
I, I'm
well,
gonna I'm gonna stand up for this though, because I think they did drop the ball, because Crew de Vue's fuss over a changed route was unfolding weeks ago, and it's the same thing with the Uptown cruise as well, where it's like I have a gripe with this route that you're making us do, and we're going to be very public and vocal about that. This Chewbacca stuff, again, it just dropped today, and it's like you said, maybe they had a meeting on Monday, but again, that tells me that they weren't planning ahead and they weren't communicating, and they dropped the ball.
regardless, we got a parade on Saturday, and
Mhm.
it's a geeky Star Wars. Remember they carry the sock of Peter Mayhew.
That old man's mad.
So hey, um, we'll take it. So Lord
yeah,
knows I don't want to be
it's
in that decision making room. So
it's one of the difficult realities of, like I said, Carnival in 2022. Just about everyone's being asked to make some sort of sacrifice or some sort of change. The reality is you wish it didn't have to come so late because, I mean, particularly for Chewbacca's, they have over 100 sub crews. They have anywhere from few people marching to floats, that people push,
and to show
and
up the day of
large
and pay
groups.
their
So
dues and march. Yeah. So
so it becomes quite difficult to all of a sudden go, okay, we're not turning here, we're going here. We don't muster down at their normal mustering point. We muster here on Royal and Elysian Field. So it creates a little, a lot of congestion and changes that last minute. I mean, I don't begrudge the overlords what they're gonna have to do between now and then because it's
yeah.
herding cats.
You
It
know,
just is.
Ariana, who's been on twice, she
Hmm.
posted this meme of Madeline Kahn from Clue with flames from the sides of my face. It's like I can only imagine the amount
Oh,
of logistical nightmare that they're dealing with right now.
yeah. It's
But
Hmm.
got to be hell. So. Um,
Yeah.
all right, well, let's do some trivia, and then let's talk about this thing that we all watched yesterday. Um, and so, to start off with, Dave, I'm going to start with you. What name do Rebel pilots more commonly use to refer to a modified T 47 airspeeder? What name do Rebel pilots more commonly use to refer to a modified T 47 airspeeder?
I am not nearly geeky enough to know this, so I'm just gonna have to guess one of their.
Think it through. Think it through, because I think you are geeky enough to know this. You don't need to know the numbers.
Right, right.
Um, what name do
Uh,
Rebel pilots most commonly use to refer to a modified T 47 airspeeder?
I'm just gonna guess snow speeders
There
because I
you
know those
go.
were
See? Ding, 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 ding,
Oh,
ding.
hey, because I know they were modified, so that was the only clue that I had there.
You got to get up. Always get up. Remember what Master Luke says. All right, Fredo.
Hmm.
What type of being celebrates the defeat of the second Death Star by playing a xylophone made of stormtrooper helmets? And as a percussionist, I would disagree that this is a xylophone, but okay, whatever. So, what type of being celebrates the defeat of the second Death Star by playing a xylophone made of stormtrooper helmets?
The obvious answer there is an Ewok.
It is an Ewok. It is.
The,
And
the
he's
darker
playing
question
more.
is what happened.
He's playing
Mhm.
more like wood blocks than a xylophone because a xylophone is definite pitch, so it actually has like B flat, C. Those are just
The-
indefinite pitched
Yeah, the,
instruments. So that's my nerdiness
yeah, the
here.
bigger question is what happened to the owners of the helmets.
Same thing that
It is
happened
a
to
piece.
same thing that happened to the woman who had the dress they gave to Princess Leia. Um,
Exactly.
so for me, what does Yoda call his class of Jedi children using training droids to sense the Force around him? He calls them younglings, and we talk about a youngling in this episode. And
Who was also a
it
foundling.
was also a foundling. And okay, so yeah, what we're gonna do, we'll just start in on this episode, and we'll let the conversation go organically. I have a feeling though we're gonna be talking a lot about a whole lots of things like wow, that person's in it, and wow, this is happening, and this has to do with Boba Fett. How? And so. But okay, so on the count of three, let's all hit play. So everybody's got Disney Plus. Skip the intro and the recap, and on the count of three, 1, 2, 3, play. And I'm going to turn on my subtitles so I can see what they're talking about. All right. So first off, I think we're overusing the
Ice cream machine.
ice cream machine a little bit, but but I was shocked to see Cobb Vanth right out the gate.
Yeah.
It was
Mhm.
cool.
It was really cool.
And Timothy Oliphant looks like he's lost some weight. I think he needs to eat a Snickers or two. But
It's just like a really welcome surprise. I thought, oh wow! Like I had no idea that he was gonna come back. I think like a lot of us were thinking in terms of like Grogu and maybe Luke and some of those things. Um, there was just no indication that this was coming. So it was really cool on that level. And then of course, he's just a total bad A here too.
I think the first movie I saw him in was The Girl Next Door. It
Mhm.
was like basically the remake of Risky Business type of a deal. But anyway, he has a look in here at some points that he looks exactly like the a-hole that he was in that movie. But anyway,
But in part, it's interesting that we're coming back and we're seeing Cobb Vanth here because it makes sense from a certain standpoint. We've, the efforts of the Pikes to take over the spice trade in Tatooine, the battle that they're having with Boba Fett. We should expect that it's going to spill out and involve other areas of the planet and other people. So the fact that Cobb Vanth, whom Boba Fett only knows because he had his armor, you know, now coming back into the fold kind of makes sense.
now I'm
It
gonna
doesn't feel shoehorned. Is
Mhm.
exactly the whole point, and that's why it works.
yeah,
And so,
Right.
this is like one of the few things in this episode that makes sense.
Mhm.
That makes for continuity. Yeah, this is like, okay, cool. Yeah, of course he would be here, and of course this would be going down. All right, this is cool. Um,
ask them to leave the spice, and so you wonder, like in that moment, like is he going to be tempted by this? And then you see him just kick it over, and you're like all of your like faith in this character
I
has been rewarded.
I am not gonna lie. I was expecting 2 lightsabers wrapped up in a cloth to come spilling out of that box when he kicked it over, and it started just slowly. It would not have. Would you have been surprised if that would have happened?
Given
No.
the
Given
rest of the
everything that's
episode.
going on,
No, but and again, I expected it to be Spice. I was worried he would be tempted. It's like, oh God, what is he gonna do with this Spice now? And immediately kicks it off, so kicks it over, so it'll just blow away in the wind. I love it.
so it shows that he is a straight shooter.
Mm-hmm.
Desert from the desert
From
comes
the
a stranger. All of these titles are very biblical, or like very biblical in nature.
They also reference elements within the episode,
Right.
more notably towards the climax of this episode.
So
In this case,
this episode
Mhm.
has had many moments that had me clapping my hands like a little child who just got a thing of ice cream, and one of the first ones is coming up here. Obviously, we knew that Mando was heading for find Grogu, but when they panned it back and saw R2, you had to have just went a little giddy there.
Yep. And then and your mind starts to race. Well, how much are they going to show now? Because R2's is like this tease. Okay, now are we going to get Luke? And then obviously they pay things off, as we go forward. They're like, you get a character and you get a character, and it's like so it's just a lot. But this was just kind of this tease, this warm, like, oh, okay, we're gonna do this, we're gonna get more, because R2 is nice to see, but it's kind of the promise of something more.
So my question that I got into is, where are they? Because of what you see coming up next with the building of that hut. It was like, okay, so are we on Anok or
No.
I know we're not, but it's, I mean, anyway.
the buildings do denote and call back to
So those
the
beehive
hut
huts,
in Actu, which I love the idea of the building droids that are
Oh
putting it all
yeah,
together. Because it's
yeah.
the kind of thing that you don't think of, when you think of, well, who's putting all these buildings together? Because okay, Luke has the Force, but do we expect him to be lifting rocks and putting stuff together? Well, this makes much more sense. He's not just building a little wooden hut. He's actually trying to build a temple to train Jedi. So
Now, where did he get this ant colony of droids, though? I'm wondering.
right.
Did
He's
Leia
got to
just
have some
hook him up?
capital somewhere. Yeah, maybe they got a lot of money for destroying the Death Star. I don't know.
Yeah.
that's a hero of the Republic. He can ask, hey, you got any of these?
So
But it's a little bit of minor world building that's cool to see.
Yeah. No, hands down, no problem. It was kind of interesting what's coming up here, because it was funny because Britt pointed out when R2 just shuts himself down right now.
Mm-hmm.
She's like, we've never seen him do that. Never seen R2 just turn off. We've seen
we
people
saw 3PO do it.
turn off C-3PO, but he just shut himself down.
I mean, other than
we
Force Awakens, if you want to throw that into there, because like
Yeah.
but that was the big shutdown in air quotes. The big shutdown was in Force Awakens. So, but yeah, other than that, you don't really see him just.
Yeah, we saw 3PO in episode 4
Yeah.
actually tell Luke, I'm going to shut myself down while he's talking to Ben. But no, we've never seen R2
But here's the
willingly
thing.
do that.
Here's the thing, though, but here's the thing that's really weird is that R2 never shuts himself down. So then he becomes again. He and 3PO, but more him is the Greek
Witness.
chorus. He knows everything that's going on, and so he's shut down now. So it's like he can't give anything up, and he can't. Is he not to see what's going on? I don't know. It was very. It would be an interesting. That'd be one of the questions I would ask Filoni. It's like, why'd you have R2 shut down?
My interpretation is simply that he's conserving energy. He's like, okay, we're done here. Like,
And
I did what I had to do. I brought you to the spot. You're gonna encounter the Jedi soon enough. All right, I'm done.
and in reality, it's a good way to pause Mando in his tracks. Like he knows he's in the right
Hmm.
place, and that's it. Okay, now you got to stop and wait, because otherwise the question will be, well, why isn't R2 taking him to see Luke and Grogu?
Okay, so let's talk Luke. Remember last
Way
time?
better. Looks way better.
Well, remember last time when we saw him, it was there was a lot of criticism of it, and then shortly thereafter, Lucasfilm went and hired the dude who made it look better on YouTube.
Hmm.
Is he doing a better job?
I think
This
so.
Yes.
works for me.
Yeah, I think it works a lot better this time around.
And here's the other thing: I've seen some critiques again of how the dialogue from Luke is just kind of meh. And
Stilted.
I want to find, well, like, not very emotional or anything. Like, I want to go find, there has to be a clip out there of every line that Luke has in Return of the Jedi. That character, that the lines are delivered much differently than in Empire or in A New Hope.
Hmm.
So
I mean,
I think when I hear that, I'm wondering, are people's mental model of the Luke from A New Hope, where he's very, fired up and, where the hell are you going? Blah, 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 blah. I'm going to Toshi's power station. Blah, blah, blah. Whereas in Return of the Jedi, he's just kind of like your
Yeah.
every normal run a day priest. You know.
think, think think of the climax in the Death Star when he turns around, throws his lightsaber, the cadence that he has when he tells Palpatine, "You failed, Your Highness. I'm a Jedi, like my father before me." I mean, he's catching his breath and he's calming himself, but the line is delivered in a very even tone, because that's the tone that he wants to strive towards as a Jedi. It's not high emotion, it's not high stress, it's very balanced.
And the
So
other thing is
the
that they've
fact that
got
he's still
well, they've got Mark Hamill delivering the lines. Unless they're only paying him
exactly.
$5 an hour, and he's given $5 an hour. I mean, this is what he's being directed to be.
Hmm.
I love the gag with the frogs because he admonishes Grogu for not paying attention because he gets distracted by a frog. Ooh, snack, you know? And
Yeah.
so the best way to get his attention, it's like, we're going to lift all the frogs up into the air, and you're going to be aware that that's a thing that you can eventually do.
Hmm.
It's like, this is the path, this is the way that, this is where we're headed, sir. Pay attention. I think, like, this is the best little subtle um, gag that they could have done there. And then
Hmm.
the one thing I'll say about Luke, you guys have seen the last Starfighter, right?
Hmm.
I
And
have
Yes.
there's,
I have not, but that's all right.
oh my goodness.
Wait a minute. No, Last
Okay.
Starfighter haven't.
Oh man. We're gonna have to watch that one. Um, okay, so there's a point where the main protagonist gets replaced by a robot. Um, and so the robot's pretending to be him. And so there's the actor playing the part is playing a robot pretending to be him. and there and there are moments of like genuine stiffness and awkwardness that come from that. And I get a little bit of that here. Like, this is what I got reminded and taken it, to use your phrase, Aaron. I got taken out of it a little bit, where it's like,
Well,
oh gosh, he's somebody pretending to be somebody, pretending to be somebody. But it is what it is, I
so
The
we
dude
get it.
disguised as the other dude.
So we get yet another Order 66 flashback. This was
Filoni. Filoni.
this was really pretty cool. I was expecting. I mean, and it cuts away right before we find out who. Okay, so we were told in second season of Mandalorian he was basically whisked away from the Jedi Temple. He was rescued by somebody. So is it a clone trooper that does it, or is it a Jedi who does it?
Well, it's an
we don't
interesting
know.
question because the way that this is said is, he's at the mercy of the the clones right here, and that's when the memory fades out. I saw somebody mention that that could have been Sindralig that was leading the defense of Grogu, but I believe Sin gets taken out by Darth Vader, if I'm not mistaken. So, but it's an interesting question because he's looking at the lightsaber, he's staring. You know, you're supposed it's part of the mystery of Grogu. How did he escape Order 66? How did he escape from the Jedi Temple? How did he end up where Mandalorian picked him up in Episode 1 or Chapter 1?
It was interesting because you watched that very first episode of The Mandalorian, and that was a thought that immediately came up because they explain this creature is 50 years old. He finds it, and so then you start doing the math, and it's like, is he force sensitive? And if he's force sensitive, was he in the Jedi Temple when that was going down? Because the math lines, and so like this has been a question all this time, and it's still not completely resolved.
Mm-hmm.
We're gonna find out more and more as we go along, but it was really cool to see that flashback from his perspective and sort of confirm as much as we already knew.
So now we get the first of many feel good moments in like probably about the next 15 minutes when, first of all, Ahsoka is there. And again, Brittany and I went, wow, didn't expect to see her. And, I think, wow, they're bringing everybody into this, I think is what Britt said. And we both enjoyed it. It was so cool then to see her interaction with R2 because she was so close with R2 in the Clone Wars. And I love the line, I'm an old friend of the family, which, okay, so we were talking offline here a little bit. This is why I'm putting my money down that we're going to see Ahsoka in the Obi-Wan Kenobi series and not just in a flashback, but in real time. And so she's going to realize that Obi-Wan is still alive, and Obi-Wan's going, yeah, I'm watching over Anakin's kid here. Keep it on the down low. It's like, all right, well, I'll go help the rebels and do this fulcrum thing. And I think eventually she will earn her Jedi status back. And that's what the Ahsoka series is going to be about, because we hear her voice when Rey is talking to all the Jedi. And she's technically not a Jedi here. So, I don't know. What do you think about Ahsoka being in this? I mean, take it to just in. Let's forget that this is the Book of Boba Fett. In these 55 minutes or whatever it was, what'd you think in the story? What'd you think of seeing Ahsoka here?
I think it makes sense.
Yeah,
Go
go
ahead,
ahead.
Dave.
No, you go ahead.
Okay. Yeah. No, I think it makes sense. It works because she is going to speak to Din in a way that's different from the way Luke might. Din is, Luke might, Din might see Luke kind of trying to keep him from seeing Grogu as a challenger, as somebody who wants to take his place. Whereas, uh, okay, whereas Ahsoka, he knows that Ahsoka will not necessarily, she doesn't want to train Grogu. As a matter of fact, he even says, you didn't want to train Grogu. And I'm like, yeah, I didn't choose that to do that. Master Luke is going to train him. So
I'm going to be cynical.
she's coming at.
I'm going to be cynical, Aaron, here a little bit. Not really cynical, but just kind of realistic. The thing, I think probably the reason why she is here ultimately is because they knew she's telling him everything that Luke could tell him. And they knew that, all right, we got to keep Luke's dialogue and screen time to a minimum. So we need somebody who can be there to relay all this expository stuff, and not have people thinking that we're watching Polar Express. That's me being, that's just,
no,
anyway.
But that's probably true. That's probably true. But it also works thematically.
Makes for
and I love the
great
idea
story.
that it's her that's building the temple, not Luke.
Yeah, and it makes sense. Just like, okay, so to your point, Aaron, story-wise, this is what we need. We need a character that will be able to offer this level of separation so that Luke can have his time apart and keep Grogu away from him. All right, so who do you want it to be? And so then the conversation becomes, well, Ahsoka might be really cool because then you can get a little bit of Ahsoka interplay with R2 and with Luke. And yeah, so on that level, I'm kind of glad they did it. I wish I would have gotten more. The stuff with Luke was good, but it's like I would have liked to have seen them talk a little bit more about Anakin, and I'm sure Luke would have had a million questions for her about his dad.
Again, I think there's going to be more of that in the Ahsoka series.
Ahsoka.
Obviously, Grogu senses Dad's presence. Um, and I really like how he's in the backpack and Luke is running around. That was, I mean, so I was watching Blind Wave. You ever watch them on YouTube
Yeah.
doing their reaction
Yes.
to this? And the one guy, he said, he goes, I know a lot of people are going to critique this, said this was all fan service. He says, I don't care. I feel served. It was like to see these things. It was so cool. If you're going to critique this as as part of the overall story and everything like that, you got to put on a different hat. All these things made you feel warm and comfy inside.
Some of this stuff with Luke is stuff that people have wanted to see since 1983.
Right.
I mean, that's that's a long time to wait and think like I would love to see, Luke training Jedi, and it's like, well, now you friggin' get it, here it is.
Which makes me wonder, just not necessarily being cynical, Aaron, but in terms of if we're getting an episode full of warm and fuzzies here, is the next episode going to be all dark and downbeat and just ripping at your heart?
Well, this one ends a little bit on that downbeat,
Hmm.
that may hint at some more
I
negativity
don't know.
coming
Luke
up.
didn't stick the landing on that jump there, but kind of a little homage to Pitfall too.
Hmm.
My kids were like, "Why is he always putting people who look like Yoda in his backpack?"
Touche.
Okay, does that also bring up the question of there's an in-universe maker of Grogu or Yoda people backpacks? And what store do you go to get them?
Again, it's also what's really cool is to see, as a teacher, there's a lot of my mannerisms, a lot of my tools, a lot of my things that I give to my students that I got from my teachers, and little bits in here and there. However, with Luke, he really only had one teacher, so he's passing on what he learned from Yoda. Um, Even to the point where he's saying, don't try, you know.
Hmm.
But I like how
Which is one of,
Grogu's doing yoga here. Yoda's doing yoga.
and it's something that that I thought of towards the end that leads to the climax of the limitations that Luke has as a teacher of Jedi. Like he was basically trained on the run, quick and dirty. He didn't get the years upon years upon years of training that even somebody like his dad, Anakin, got. So when things eventually do go bad, as we know they must because the sequel trilogy exists, you can kind of see where the limitations of Luke's training as a teacher come into the equation. Because all he can do is pass on what he's been taught. Now it's the basics of being a Jedi and connecting with the Force, so that's good enough. But knowing and recognizing where the line between light and dark are, he might not necessarily have gotten the full book on that. He might just have gotten a chapter.
I think where Luke ends is not ideal, um, and we'll get to that here shortly. But I fully agree with you, Fredo, about that. I wrestle with those kinds of questions all the time as a parent. It's like, what did my parents do in these situations? And did I hold these grudges against my parents? And was I even aware of what they were wrestling with at times? And how do I take those lessons and apply them forward? And it just, there's no, again, there's no one size fits all answer to any of that stuff. But Luke is particularly ill equipped given the fact that, he hung out with Yoda for a couple of weeks, maybe.
Yeah, and here's the thing too is I'm looking at this again from my teacher perspective, and first year teachers were all just surviving on the theory that we got, in the previous 4 or 5 years. And the good teachers change drastically throughout their career. There's new epiphanies. There's new things you try to take on. You realize that something that you thought when you were, and I'm going to pause for a second because to see Luke and Ahsoka interact was incredible as well. And when she says that, R2 called me, I'm wondering if this is the first time. This is the first time that they've interacted, because Luke's like, when am I going to see you again?
The other thing I wanted to say too is seeing Grogu leaping around is very reminiscent of Yoda in Attack of the Clones. And it's just like, it's a nice little callback, and I'm like, yay, I get to see this sort of thing again.
So, but getting back to my teacher thing here is that, like I said, the good teachers, I mean, they change drastically through their careers. The bad teachers, or the teachers who like leave the profession because they're sick of it, or things like that, and is because they never grew as a teacher. And I don't think Luke ever grew as a teacher, because he was, we see at the end, we'll talk about it, he's still saying you can't have attachments. Whereas, Ahsoka would probably be the first one to say, no, you got to have attachments. It was like it's there. So he still did even in The Last Jedi, he was talking about the dogmatic ways. He realized that it was wrong, but he was still wanting to save the sacred Jedi text. So he wanted to grow, but he didn't know how to grow. So I love Luke Skywalker, but he's a failed teacher.
Well, and that's kind of the hard part, is because he's limited, like you're saying, first year teachers. Well, imagine you being a first year teacher and now trying to teach other teachers how to be a teacher with just that limited experience. It's, there's only so much you're going to be able to impart. And I love the lines there where he says that he's actually more helping him remember than he's teaching him anything. So it shows, okay, that number one, Grogu had some training at the Jedi Temple, which you would expect, but also that so far, if there's any progress, it's, Luke is more helping him, guiding him back towards his path than anything, which is good, but also it's not giving him the feedback that he needs to know I'm doing the right thing.
But it's also, Luke is also the product of a failed educational system. I mean, he had one teacher that, Ben died, and then he dropped out of Yoda's school and then came back and Yoda died. So like I said, he didn't have much guidance in the way of this thing, but that's the opportunity then to, like I said, I think in here he's in survival mode. So he just gets stuck in those ways.
Yeah, that's part of it too. Like, again, like he doesn't have these actual people to sort of draw from. Like, and so it's like, well, let me look at how the Jedi did it. Let me go look at the texts and the Jedi texts.
And the reason why young teachers get better is because they see older teachers doing it better than them, and they're like, I want to do that. I like this. I like that. I want to do these things. That's why Yoda was a great teacher, but he was the product of many Jedi. So now we get into
the headliner of this episode of the show,
who all he does
making
is
his guest appearance.
All he does is give a head nod. He doesn't even say, "Hey, what's up?" They just look at each other and do just kind of the bro head nod. This is all Fennec Shand.
Which, by the way, I'm loving. Ming-Na Wen is awesome. Has been awesome in everything she's been. So I love her kind of guiding and leading here, because she's got all this experience, so it makes sense. There you go. Head nod. Mandalorian.
Doctor.
But it is. I mean, again, we go back to last week's criticism, and it's only even bigger. Here, it's the Book of Boba Fett is guest starring Boba Fett the last few weeks. It's not his show anymore.
Well, and that's why, again, we were talking about this before we started recording, is that I think we have to stop critiquing this story within the confines of the title, and we have to see how does it fit in the greater story of Mandalorian season 1, season 2 here, where it's like we're watching the same musical, but we're, this is just a little,
Intermission or interlude.
yeah, just kind of a little interlude. I mean, we're still telling the same story, but there's just some different characters. So, but however, it gets into Lucasfilm and Disney's, that's their fault. I was watching, it was Hello Greedo today. He said, this is great. He said, but the problem is that if we go 15 years in the future and somebody's going to start watching The Mandalorian for the first time, we're going to say, okay, great, watch season 1, season 2. Then you're going to have to go watch these couple episodes of the Book of Boba Fett because some real cool stuff happens. It's like they're not making it any easier on themselves.
I think and we're, again, this is more of a critique than it was even last week, because even last week you could sort of like explain it away. You say, well, okay, in the previous episode they were talking about bringing in muscle. This next episode they immediately show who the muscle's going to be, and they're going to tell us more about his story, and you get caught up super quick if you've never watched the show before. So you could watch, in theory, if you wanted to, the Book of Boba Fett and just be completely caught up within the confines of that story. This episode is not that at all. This episode is, we're pulling in Mandalorian's greatest hits, and now like this series has sort of morphed into Mandalorian season 2.5, because it's not season 3. It's 2.5, which again is fine, but again, it's a fair critique to say, like, well, why did you call it the Book of Boba Fett unless you were just trying to like get fanboys of Boba Fett from 30 years ago to like jump on board with this series and try to stoke the flames of it. It's like I don't get it. I have to talk about the skeleton though of the crate dragon. Like the skull on the top of the sandcrawler. Yeah.
I'm not there already. We're drinking whiskey in the bar.
The rib cage is in the bar.
Oh, okay.
The ribcage of the crate dragon.
I thought you were talking about the skull that's going to be on the sandcrawler here in a little bit.
Yeah, I think we already saw that. But regardless, like you can see these bones in this bar. I'm pretty sure they weren't there before.
They weren't.
What I also kind of dig is that they've also, people freaked out because what's most Pelgo, and now they've decided to change their name to Freetown so it aligns with what was in Aftermath,
right?
Because he was which makes you wonder, okay, did they do an oopsie in season 2 and then went, okay, yeah, we can fix that, let me give me 5 minutes, or or was it meant to be? I don't know.
Well, and it's it's part of the fine threading of things that Filoni and crew have to do, because there's the stuff from the books, there's the stuff from the other shows, there's the stuff that's come before, so it's all got to mesh together. Again, when chapter 1 of the first season of Mandalorian came, this was all new field. Nobody had done anything with it. Now we are building all these connections, so it proves a lot harder to say, okay, you're gonna do this versus not do this.
Yeah, but again, I'm still. I know I've been like critical of the story group, but it's like, okay, so somewhere in season 2, they're like, hey, and we're Cobb Vanth is going to be in it, and he's the marshal of Mos Pelgo, and somebody on that board should have said, in the book we called it Freetown.
I love the
they might have done it, but this is an elegant solution to me.
All right, so I'm sorry. This is the second. I agree. It was cool, but it's anyway.
Fredo, you were gonna say something before.
No, I was just gonna say I love the foreshadowing, the way that the camera work, the noise drops there before the first shot into the desert of the stranger walking out of it.
Mm-hmm.
It was just really well done.
I started doing that. My wife was like, "What's going on?" I was like, "I think that might be Cad Bane," and she says, "That means nothing to me." But so, but that
This is
was
how you know who saw Clone Wars and Rebels and who didn't.
right. And so she still enjoyed the episode, but it hit on a different, maybe didn't hit as hard because it's like, all right, so there's just some dude she's put two and two together. Some dude is like, a hired gun to say, nope, Pike's got this. But for the
Mm-hmm.
rest of us, it's like, it's Cad friggin' Bane. And I
It's
said, this is what I wanted before Book of Boba Fett. I wanted to see Cad Bane. Um,
You got your wish. How'd you feel about the execution here?
um, I thought his hat was too small. I wanted a wider build hat, but he can, whatever. You buy new
you can buy
hats.
a new hat.
Yeah, yeah, you
Um,
could buy a new hat.
I dug that the the voice was the same guy from Clone Wars. The coloring is different. It's not as dark blue. I saw today online some, what the net does. They go and fix it up and made it look a little bit even more like Cad Bane. But
But then
again,
again,
I come back to it's like the animated series are like an artist's interpretation of what it was in real life.
and they take place now, what, 40 years from this moment. So, we don't know about his species. Maybe they get lighter as they age. We can see that because a lot of the stuff around him looks brand shiny and new. So who knows?
I don't know. What'd
But
you
I
guys
love I
think?
love the moment. Yeah, I love the moment with the eyes just look up and you're like, yep, it's Cad Bane. That's like, I believe the moment when I was like, no way, he's not doing that. Then, yeah, the moment you hear his voice, you're like, yep, that's who it is.
Yeah, and you got
And
the hoses. You can see the hoses, and
the teeth.
yeah, yeah, it's clearly him. Um, we're not talking about the deputy here, who is obviously like way out of his depth and creates all this added tension in the scene. Because you're like, oh gosh, this is a wild card. We don't know how he's gonna bugger everything up, but he's certainly gonna bugger everything up. And right kind of raises the stakes of things, and you know that um I mean, you just know they're not going to bring Cad Bane into live action and then have him lose like 5 seconds later a gunfight. So, um, and you hate it. I mean, at least I did because I love Cobb Vanth, and I've
Hmm.
really grown to appreciate that character a great deal. And again, I said it earlier, his morality like really struck a chord with me, where like he
What
kicks the spice over, and it's like I don't want him to die. I'm
I don't I
watching
don't I
this.
don't think he is. I don't think he
Yeah,
is because
I
he
don't
gets
think
hit
so
right.
either.
once. The deputy gets gunned like he
Yeah,
Four
empties the
shots.
cartridge on
yeah,
him.
yeah. Like
So
like he unloads on the deputy, but he only gives kind of a glancing warning shot
I bet this is
to
going to
Cobb Vanth.
have this is going to be like Back to the Future 3 that stole from what was it, The Good, Bad, and the Ugly.
Uh, a fistful of dollars.
Fistful of Dollars, where it's like he's got something under his shirt, a little piece of Beskar that he kept, that protected him. Just anyway, I don't think Cobb Vanth is dead.
I do think too, like the big reason I don't think he is again the storytelling potential. They're like he's a great character. We don't want to kill him off, um, but like they've been hinting at these cybernetic implants,
Hmm.
Hmm.
and they've been showing us this and sort of beating us over the
The
head.
mods will fix him.
Mm-hmm. And I think like that's I just really think that's where we're headed with that. But I mean, we'll see.
Hold on, what
We'll
they just
see.
say there? Is he
I
okay? Grab the stems. The marshal, is he breathing? I'm sorry, I'm just reading the
yeah.
closed captions. Come on, get him. There's something
Yeah.
wrong with the marshal.
The
Somebody help.
bartender's pissed,
Hmm.
and
Which I
this is
think
good.
is interesting. Hmm.
I was gonna say it's maybe the call to arms that they needed to watch their sheriff, who they all adore, get gunned down. It's like okay, the Pikes are coming for us. We're gonna stand up for our own.
Because what's interesting, Cobb Vanth is kind of like 50-50 on joining Din on
Mm-hmm.
his fight, but it's the bartender who's like, nope, look, we've seen enough. We're not sticking our nose in anybody else's business. We're cool with just hanging back and letting whatever happens in Mos Eisley take care of itself. But
But
now, obviously, the look at Cad Bane walking away is one of, okay, clearly we can't just let this slide.
uh,
And by the way, if you didn't get flashbacks to the opening of the Untouchables with this
right.
scene, it's like, come on now.
And notice that you don't see Max Rebo anywhere, kids. So
Oh,
seriously,
But
they show all the musicians every other episode. They've made a point to show Max Rebo. Max looks like he got the day off, so maybe Max
everybody
is
was
in
coming
on
in
it.
later that night.
Maybe he got a tip that something was coming. Max, you best not show
mm-hmm.
up to the gig tonight. Um,
You knew these people were doomed when Max wasn't there because it's like, well, Max has to survive, and if Max is not around, you're in trouble.
so
I just
now,
keep thinking
okay,
like, oh, Robot
I've
Chicken.
got a bone to pick. I need nerddom out there to help me, because here's where Luke makes Grogu, have Sophie's choice. Um, he's got Yoda's lightsaber. Yoda lost
Hmm.
his lightsaber in Episode 3. Yeah,
He did.
he didn't have it with him when he got in the car with Bail Organa, because
No.
the Emperor, made him go fallen, and he lost his lightsaber. Um, so it makes you wonder, how's Luke got
I guess
Yoda's
to me
lightsaber?
the one theory that I kind of have is that obviously in the search for Master Yoda that the clones do through the Senate chambers, maybe one found this lightsaber because we know it fell in the battle when him and Sidious, you know, basically formed a ball of force lightning and pushed one another. So
That's true.
maybe
And maybe
maybe the Emperor kept it as a trophy in his office, and Leia found it and gave it to Luke, just as a means to remember Yoda by. So,
And
but what
and
else?
and or he
Mhm.
may have created another one.
Well, no,
and,
because
and
he says
here's
it's
my
Master
okay. So
Yoda's.
here's my other thing is that so we're seeing Luke is making Grogu choose between being a Jedi or going with his Mandalorian friend, and it's like, why? I would hope that this story would allow him to be both. We know he's not. I mean, because that's the way the dark saber got started, was a Mandalorian Jedi. I mean, so I still want to see this little green guy in Mandalorian armor wielding a lightsaber. And that doesn't make he's neither Jedi nor Mandalorian. He is just what he is. Because like I told you guys in the chat, is like, if he goes on to be a Jedi, then he's getting slaughtered by Ben Solo in about 20 years.
And, yeah, to me, and this is kind of where I may go on a rant here, just FYI, because
I'll drink
this
my
is where you
whiskey. You go
see,
on your rant.
yeah, yeah, this is where you see the failure of Luke Skywalker as a teacher. Because in Return of the Jedi, it's established. He knows this, how his attachment to his friends is the thing that gets him through the darkest moments. It's his love for his sister, it's his love for Han, for Chewie, for Lando, for these people that he spent all these years fighting with, that gives him the strength to see the goodness in his dad, to see the goodness in the monster that is Darth Vader. And yet, the first chance he gets, after reading a few books, what he does is run back to the dogmatic ways of the Jedi and go, oh no, you cannot have any attachments. You can't have any loved ones. You got to distance yourself from everybody. And you're like, dude, the people who care about you the most, he's not cutting off Leia. He's not cutting off Han. He's not saying, okay, I'll see you later. Bye. He's still having these relationships, these emotions. And he's like, did you not recognize where the Jedi fell short? And then, of course, that's when I think
But
makes
this
sense. Of course, the dogmatic ways of the Jedi would be the ones that would lead him into trouble with Ben 20 years down the
but
line.
this is what makes the Last Jedi Luke Skywalker so awesome, and why so many
Hmm.
people had such a problem with it. But I loved it because, again, it wasn't until recently, if we talk Last Jedi, that he realized that those ways were messed up, and
Mm-hmm.
so or actually it was probably right after he tried to kill his nephew that he realized those ways are messed up, and it took him that long to realize he failed as a teacher. He's a beautifully failed character, and that bothers
Yeah.
people because they want Luke Skywalker to be perfect. And if Luke Skywalker was perfect, he'd be boring. I've said it a gazillion times on this podcast. Um,
At this stage of things, he's just sort of pretending at being the Jedi, right? And he's got imposter syndrome.
Mm-hmm.
I'm the only one left. I don't know what I'm doing here. I'm just gonna lean into what they did before, and so that's why he's going against his instincts of I should care for the people around me and surround myself with them. He's like, well, this is what the Jedi did, so this is what I have to do. So it really makes a lot of sense in that way, but it's still also like frustrating. You're like, come on, you're an idiot, cut it out. This is terrible what you're doing to this poor kid. It's like, again, Aaron, I agree with you. I wouldn't be surprised if that was like the ultimate outcome is that Grogu takes the example set by Ahsoka, which is like, I'm going to carve out my own path. And again, the Darksaber stuff, the first Mandalorian Jedi, that could be a bit of a hint as well. And it's like, well, this is where we're going to go. We're going to do things our own way. We're not going to do things the Jedi way. And we're going to see where that takes us. I'd love to see it unfold that way. And because there'd be a nice symmetry to it based on everything that we've seen to this point.
Now, are you guys in my camp yet, wondering how they're going to wrap all this stuff up next week? Because
do you think we'll get season 2?
The only thing that this episode did was just make everything more convoluted. Because last episode, now if they would have been like last episode, oh man, I can't fight with this Darksaber, and then he shows up and he sees Grogu and Luke, and he's like, hey, can you give me a few pointers, boss? And Luke says, yeah, here, do a couple of these things. So he gets a little training, or even Ahsoka. And then now I can go fight with my Darksaber. But that wasn't paid off at all in this episode. Again, this was just another, again, it's like in software development, when you're working in code, they do what they call branching, where you take the main branch and you split off from it. And so you have this parallel branch that you can mess around in and not affect. And then you can make your changes and merge that into the main branch. And that's what's going on here. It's like these last 2 episodes, we've had the storyline, then we just branched off and we're just playing around, which, by the way, these last couple episodes is just Dave Filoni playing with his action figures. Mm-hmm. I mean, these are the stories we would have made up, because I've got Cad Bane and Luke Skywalker. How do I make them work in the same story? All right, here we go. But anyway, next episode is going to probably be awesome, but just really confusing.
Well, and again, that's where we're at right now. That was the choice, the creative choice they made. It's just like, it's not, you can't just like come into this. Again, you could, I'm sorry. You could come into this blind and say, I'm just going to watch the Boba Fett show and do okay, I guess. But you're not going to get nearly as much out of it if you haven't watched The Mandalorian.
Or Clone Wars.
Or Clone Wars or Rebels.
Right.
And we're getting to that point now where it's like, you have to do the summer reading. Kids, you need to have watched these shows. The Cad Bane thing, I'm with you, Aaron. I'm freaking out. My kids are freaking out because they've watched this. They've seen this character before. They're like, oh, that's Cad Bane. Well, they didn't figure it out as quickly as I did or Kate did. But we're like, well, we think we know who it is. And they're like, who is it? Who is it? But then when they knew, they were like, yes, this is amazing. Somebody who's just coming into this thing blind, they're not going to have that reaction at all. They're not going to. Well, who's the guy with the red eyes and the cowboy hat?
That was Brittany's reaction, and again, she understands. Obviously, I mean,
right?
Okay, he's working for those guys over here.
Yeah,
but it doesn't hit on the emotional level of,
exactly. And so,
ladies and gentlemen, prepare to lose your mind.
Yeah, and so like, I don't know if it's a problem per se for Star Wars, but it's definitely a unique challenge that they have. Like if you compare this to like Endgame for the Avengers, it's like the end of Endgame, everybody shows up, but you already know who those characters are.
Right.
I mean, you know
If
them.
you haven't watched any other Marvel movies, that moment does not hit like if Endgame
It
was the first
wouldn't,
one you
yeah,
watch, it does not hit the way it hits after I spend a whole summer watching all these movies. Then I see that, I can't
right.
imagine going through it for 10 years, or whatever it was. Um,
And and so like the difference I think is like the barrier is smaller. So like you're
Hmm.
talking about watch the Avengers movies, which again is still an ask. Um, but then you watch the Avengers movies and you're like, okay, I'm good to go. And then you watch the movie and it's like, oh wow, this is amazing. It's like with Star Wars, there's no real clear direction that people
but
should
it's,
take.
but yeah, you're
You know,
right.
like, oh, you got to watch the animated stuff. No, you don't got to watch the animated stuff. And it's like you get these different versions of viewing guides from all these different people, and you're like, well, I guess I'll watch the movies,
But on a
and then you
very,
watch this moment, and it's like,
on
ah,
a very rudimentary level, though, you're right. I think we are all in agreement that the execution of what they're doing is not well
right,
planned, not well thought of. But what's very cool here is that, and what they are doing, and I wonder if this is if these, the Mandalorian and the Book of Boba Fett maybe have had a utilitarian purpose of bringing all of the eras of Star Wars into the same room, because in this episode we've had character from the original trilogy, we had characters from the prequels, we had characters, new characters that we just learned post, original trilogy. You could also say that Luke is a sequel trilogy, but it's like if you would have thrown Maz Kanata in there, then you would have had it, where it's like all eras are. But since Luke is in that one, I'll give it. But you had all eras of Star Wars in the same room. And before it was always, this is a prequel show, this is an original trilogy show, this is a sequel trilogy show. Um, so again, I think, and then of course you got the books because Cobb Vanth was in the books.
mhm.
So you are seeing, it's like Dave Filoni is and Jon Favreau are saying, and that's the funny thing is everybody goes to Filoni first. Jon Favreau is the one who's producing this and like heading this up. Filoni is obviously huge, but what they're doing is saying everybody, all of this is one big Star Wars story,
Right.
all these characters, and we're finally seeing that, and so it's getting everybody on the same, like I said, in the same room. It's like, okay, if you were a prequels guy, guess what, you're probably going to see Cad Bane squaring off against Luke Skywalker at some point. That could very well happen. You know what I mean?
Don't see why not.
It's like you could have it, so there's, or here we're going to put Luke Skywalker and Ahsoka Tano in talking to each other, so it brings the original trilogy and the prequel trilogy people who have been at each other's throats for 20 years, you know, to enjoy the same thing. Maybe that's what
Yeah,
they're
you just
trying to do with these series. They're doing a
well, you just
poor
made
job of it, but I mean,
well, and that therein lies the question of if you only have so many episodes, are you stuffing them full of, you know, too much stuff, versus, like we're talking about how the Book of Boba Fett, something about Boba Fett, would have been better just call it something like the Mandalorians or something, or I don't know, I don't know. We're gonna get an Ahsoka show. Do you think we'll see Cat Bane in Ahsoka's show? Because they got history.
I'm wondering if we're going to see Boba Fett anytime, like anymore after this. Because again, we got one episode. And either if he's alive at the end of this next episode, then yeah, we're probably going to see him again because his
Hmm.
story has not been paid off.
No,
Hmm.
And
not
He's,
really.
I don't know how they do that in the next episode. I think there almost has to be either he's going to have another series or he's going to be in the Mandalorian season 3.
well, and the other question that I mean, I've seen some people kind of theorize it's the idea of when the armor in the previous chapter mentioned the idea of the mythosaur and reclaiming Mandalore. Naturally, everybody's thought went to Din, but what if it's Boba Fett?
It's
What if
true.
it's Boba's goal to eventually become the leader of the Mandalorians, not Din Djarin?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of storytelling potential there. Aaron, you've said that you would expect Omega to show up.
Yeah,
Uh,
I still bet because the way this has all been going, I bet that could happen in the last episode.
you've also said Kira,
Yeah,
um, and I feel like Kira would be the more likely of the two.
yeah.
Um, but at this point, we're getting a lot of Pike action. Where it's Kate and I were talking. I was like, we're gonna go back and rewatch Solo. I think, and because it just kind of feels really relevant right now to this particular story, and which is funny because you haven't seen any of those characters. You were talking about uniting all of Star Wars um right now under one umbrella, and not like that might be a way to do it too, is to bring in some of these these figures from Solo like Kira. But um
Well, that's the interesting thing that I find out. No, when anybody ever, the only thing you keep hearing reference, nobody ever says really Pikes. What they say is the Syndicate,
mhm.
and there are several syndicates. That's why I'm thinking the syndicate that we're talking about is Crimson Dawn, and the Pikes are working for Crimson Dawn. You know, I just find it very interesting that they have said the syndicate. They haven't said the Pikes run this, you know, this area.
Right.
So I think you're right. Now, okay, so how about this? What if Kira's right hand person is Omega?
Gosh, Omega's so hopelessly optimistic.
Again,
I just,
the way this
Yeah,
whole thing is going, that
yeah.
you cannot cast that aside. Everything's in fair play. Um, like I said, this episode, I think we need to wrap it up because your alarm went off and we could ramble forever. At the end of the day, it was like I'm of two hats. It's like the the right brain and the left brain. You know, the emotional side of me was like on cloud nine for all the things I saw. I saw R2, I saw Grogu running around with Luke, I saw Yoda's lightsaber, I saw Ahsoka talking to Luke, I saw, you know, all these things just made me go. And we saw Cad Bane. I was like giddy. The analytical side of me is like, this is the most poorly planned storyline from episode 1 through episode 6 that I have seen in Star Wars. And that's saying something because I think it rivals, I think it's getting lost in itself. And, you know, we criticize the Rise of Skywalker. You know, it seems to be a little bit more of a direct line through the sequel trilogy than this right now. And that might be a little bit hyperbole. But like I said, the analytical side of me is like, this is a mess. Emotional side of me, I'm like 10 out of 8 stars, you know? So I don't know. What do
yeah,
you guys
no,
think?
it's an interesting exercise because on the one hand, it is giving the fans exactly what they want. You asked for Cad Bane, here's Cad Bane. You asked for more Luke. Not only did we give you more Luke, we gave you better Luke with Grogu. We gave you Master Luke teaching. We gave you more Ahsoka. You got a little bit more R2. You got to see a bit of connections to the sequel trilogy. You got to see more Din Djarin. Again, you got to see Cobb Vanth. So we're giving you all this kind of cool stuff that you're happy and enjoyed and loved. But then, like I said, that's the left Twix side. The right Twix side goes, none of this, again, although this could have been surmised with a few lines of dialogue between Din and Boba before they have to take care of what they got to take care of. And again, given the breadth of what we expect is meant to come, they once again put themselves in a position where the final episode's almost got to go at breakneck speed to resolve everything if we think it's the final episode and not final episode of season one.
I don't worry a lot about that, and it probably will happen. I mean, it probably will that we'll get a really jam packed episode that's flying from place to place and trying to resolve everything, and we're like, oh gosh, well, you had an entire series to fit all this stuff in, and you didn't do it. Well, I think you dropped the ball a little bit there, but I circle back to something that you said, Aaron, which really resonated with me, which is like this idea of pulling all these different eras of Star Wars under one umbrella, and they're doing that. And I recently wrote a little piece on Rise of Skywalker. People can check out if they want to. Um, and it was essentially the point of the article was, why do I still enjoy this movie when it's my least favorite Star Wars movie? Um, and really, what sort of centered the article around was that it gives Star Wars a future. It caters to a younger generation, who's not us. And in doing so, it assures itself a future in the process. And I feel like that's what Star Wars has to continue to do. Grogu's immensely popular with children. Bring in more Grogu. Go for it. Do it. It's different. It's weird. I'm all about it because it is different and weird. But the kids love it. This is going to help you long term. Bringing in these children, which again is a lot of the point. These are stories tailored to children. When it's working at its best, it works on different levels for adults as well. And this is why we're sitting here talking about Star Wars once a week as grown men. But it is designed for the children, and that's the whole point. It's like, well, yeah, let's do stuff that's, for lack of a better word, cool. Let's do stuff that people, kids are going to gravitate towards and love and appreciate. And so they're going to get like folded into this universe that we have. And while we're doing that, let's, invite all these other fans into the room with us. It's like, oh, you're a prequel fan. You can come on over. You're a Clone Wars fan. We got space for you too. Oh, sequel trilogy, we got you. You come on in. And they're really trying to do that, and I really appreciate that. Again, I understand the criticism. This is not what we were sold. But let's see where they end it next week. I'll be really curious.
All right, so I'm going to prognosticate, and so we can this is going to be recorded, so we'll see what happens. But we're going to get another season, if you will, of Boba Fett. It's going to end on a cliffhanger next week. Here's what's going to happen. There's going to be we're going to be at a stalemate of sorts, guns pointed at everybody. Looks like Boba Fett and Fennec Shand has the upper hand, and out comes Kira. That's where we get the reveal of Kira, running Crimson Dawn. She's going to say, you're going to be wanting to put those guns down because here's what we've got. And they're going to pull the ace out of their back pocket, and you're going to see Cad Bane come on with a gun pointed at Omega. Because Fennec Shand knows Omega. Boba Fett obviously does. And that's the way he said, you're going to want to back down. Otherwise, bad things are going to happen to your sister. Credits.
You're on the record, sir.
There we go. We'll see what happens.
Mm-hmm.
Then like 80 Jedis come flying in.
Batman suits out of nowhere.
And then Thanos appears with his Infinity Gauntlet.
This is when you start mixing the Star Wars and He-Man, and this is when, everything gets... then Skeletor jumps in.
And now comes Rambo.
All right, well, we got to get the Transformers in here somewhere,
right.
too. Yeah.
And the 1970s, like 3-foot Godzilla that, shoots his hand, So, all right. Well, tell us how you're feeling about the Book of Boba Fett and what you thought of these last 2 episodes. Like I said, talk to us about Star Wars during the day. We love being distracted from work. And maybe next week we'll have a little bit of coaching news to talk about for the New Orleans Saints. We'll see what happens there. God
Yeah,
be
I'm
with
just
us all.
listening. I'm just watching. I was just reading Nick Underhill saying that the Saints are planning on interviewing Eric Bieniemy, the Chiefs offensive coordinator.
You know, Kat Terrell said something very interesting. Britt was sharing this with me that said that this is different than in when Sean Payton was hired, is that all these candidates, it's not like the Saints went to them and said, we want to interview you. People want this job. These are agents of coaches reaching out saying, hey, can my guy interview? So be exciting. Yeah. So anyway, like I said, maybe we'll have some news next week. A little bit more of a Who Dat show, but let's see where this last episode lands us. So until then, we will say Who Dat.
Who that?
Who dat?
And everybody have a great week.
McConkey.